Welcome back to the Illinois Fighting Illini Dynasty. I'm your host, Jay Shoob, and we are back. Yes, the Dynasty was never going away. We took a little bit of a hiatus, but now after a good and healthy offseason, we are back for Season 4, and I couldn't be any more excited. I hope you guys are excited as well. This Illinois squad accomplished a lot last season. They won the Big Ten Conference Championship. They also won the Rose Bowl over number 4 Washington and capped off a 12-2 season, the first 12-win season in a long time for this Illini football program. Coach David Deal got a hefty contract extension at the end of last year. If you guys haven't checked out the offseason video, I highly recommend you go and check that out. As far as the outlook for this year's team here in 2024, there's going to be a lot of new faces. And despite the fact that Illinois does return 7 starters on offense and 7 starters on defense, this team is going to look a little bit different. A lot of the key players from last year's senior class that we were accustomed to being in major roles throughout this dynasty in the first 3 seasons, a lot of those guys are gone. And I think as far as the offense, the biggest piece coming back, of course, is Deuce Spann at quarterback. Deuce Spann, he won the job over Isaiah Williams last year, and after that, he never looked back. Deuce Spann was the better quarterback, and I think he really raises the ceiling for what this team can accomplish this season, despite some of the lost production around him. There's going to be a lot of new young receivers in this core, and on the defense as well, there's a few big key players lost, so we'll get all into that today. And then we're going to end today with the UCF game preview at the end of the video. That'll be time-stamped, so let's get into it. So taking a look at this roster here for Illinois in 2024, Deuce Spann, the quarterback, he will be the highest graded player on this team, sitting at 93, with Jerzon Newton and Josh Kreutz falling behind him. Now we're going to take a look through the starters for this year's team, starting with the offensive skill position players here. Of course, Deuce Spann coming back at quarterback. That is huge. Deuce Spann certainly elevates the floor for what I think this team will accomplish this season. As long as Deuce Spann stays healthy, I think this offense still has a chance to be very solid, even though there's a lot of missing pieces from last year's team that won't be coming back this year. I think the main thing to look out for with this offense is the wide receivers. It's a very young receiving core. 2 out of the 3 starters here on the graphic are new starters. Patrick Bryant, the only one returning that saw a lot of production last season. Kenny Rogers was a guy that broke out late in the season, so he'll certainly be a guy to look out for on this receiving core. And then Zach Anderson, I think the tight end unit is the weakest unit on this team, and Zach Anderson will be thrown into the fire as a true sophomore in his second season. And then, of course, Reggie Love and Josh McCray, that tandem at running back will be very good. I expect to see Reggie Love get to the bulk of the carries. I'm excited to see what he can do this year, being RB1. And now moving on to the offensive line, I think this unit has a chance to be pretty solid this year. In fact, I think the O-line can be the best that it has been in this dynasty up to this point. And that's because you see there 4 out of 5 guys are returning starters, and 4 out of 5 of them are seniors as well. Pfeiffer Griffin, we moved from right tackle over to left tackle this offseason. And then Blaise Sparks over at right tackle, I think he is the only question mark on this offensive line. We kicked him out from guard to right tackle, but besides that, I think this offensive line will be not elite, but I think it'll be very solid. And like I said, it has a chance to be the best that it has been up to this point in this dynasty. And now the defensive front 6. Of course, if you watch the offseason video, I went in detail about how we're going to be transitioning to the 4-2-5 base defense this season to sort of play to the strength of this roster, and I'm very excited as the user to kind of learn this new base defense myself. We have a new defensive coordinator as well, Jerry Ozanaro. And you look at right here, the defensive front 6, this has historically been the strength of this defense in this dynasty, the defensive line in particular, but 3 out of 4 guys on the D-line are new. There's a ton of production lost from last year, especially on the defensive line. We're missing guys like Keith Randolph, Seth Coleman, Moses Okpala. It's safe to say there will be a bit of a drop-off on the defensive line. However, it'll be interesting to see how these new guys step up to the plate. Sedarius McConnell, Trevon Riggins, Ryan Williams, 2 new defensive ends. We'll see how they get going, and I think linebackers should be very solid. Of course, Patrick Coleman will be a 3rd-year starter returning, so excited to see him at linebacker. And then the secondary. The secondary, I think, will be the best unit of players on this entire squad here. 4 out of 5 guys will be returning starters. And Wyatt Anderson at nickel, he'll be a guy that will sort of be like a hybrid safety in this 4-2-5 scheme, and I'm very excited to see what he can do. You also see a lot of Joriel Washington at that position as well. Prince Green and Daniel Edwards return at cornerback. Both of those guys are going to be 4th-year starters. And then Darren Robinson and Cornelius Taylor, those guys are both 3rd-year starters. So a ton of starting experience returning in the secondary. It is very experienced. It is talented. It has a ton of depth. This will be the best unit on this team by far. And I think this will help supplement the loss on the defensive line that we're going to see this season. And I'm very excited to see how these guys all fly around the field in this new system in the 4-2-5. And then lastly, special teams. Reggie Mathis returns at kicker. The guy's got a cannon for a leg. Excited to see him. He'll be around for a while. And then Hugh Robertson, it'll be his last season as the punter. We got to find a newer punter in recruiting this year. And then you can see kick returner. It'll be Cornelius Taylor. It was very close to decide which guy would be the kick returner. We decided to go with Cornelius Taylor. And then punt returner, we gave the edge to Daniel Edwards. So we'll see 2 new faces. And it'll be very odd not seeing Kyron Cumbie. I'm not going to lie. We saw a lot of him over the last 3 seasons. But it's time for new guys to step up in that regard on special teams. And so now that we've gone through the starters preview for this Illini roster, let's take a look here at the recruiting. So if you watched the offseason video, I of course went over how I'm going to be implementing my own new house rules for the recruiting. And basically, I think the recruiting in this game, it is very easy to sort of game the system. And you can get a lot of good recruits that you normally shouldn't otherwise be getting realistically. And even though I think it is very realistic for Illinois to get good recruits in this dynasty based on our on-field success, I'm going to sort of put a limit on what exactly I can and can't do as far as the recruiting. So I'll put the house rules up on the screen here. So these are the new recruiting house rules. All players added to the original preseason recruiting board are fair game as normal, so nothing changes with how I approach them. I cannot scout recruits that are added in season to the recruiting board. So this is the biggest factor right here. I am not allowing myself to scout players that are added to the recruiting board in season, because it is very easy to take a shotgun approach and just sort of add a bunch of players as you can. Add as many players as you can, scout them, find the gems, and then dump the ones that aren't gems, and sort of use that shotgun approach to add a ton of very good recruits that you wouldn't otherwise be realistically getting. But here's a couple caveats as well. In addition to not being able to scout the recruits in season, all 3-star and lower recruits will be available to be added in season, but 4- and 5-star recruits must be in a pipeline state or have top 10 interest in Illinois to be added to the board in season. So those 4- and 5-star recruits, they have to be inside a pipeline state or have Illinois as one of their top 10 schools that they are interested in order for me to add them into the board mid-season. And so in addition to not being able to scout these guys, I think this will make it a little bit more challenging. It'll make the recruiting outcome a little bit more realistic, even though maybe it won't drop off too much. But I think especially after last year's recruiting class, got a ton of guys using that, and I took advantage of the system. So maybe a little bit of coming back down to earth here. Taking a look at the prospect map here, you can see the strategy. Now that I'm forcing myself to only add 4- and 5-star prospects in pipeline states, I'm really focusing on the states of Michigan and Florida. Those 2 states, Florida is already a pipeline state. We want to keep it that way. And Michigan is a rich state. We're only 1 prospect away from turning Michigan into a pipeline state. So I want to make that state a pipeline. And now looking at the schedule here, UCF, we'll be opening up against them at home. We played them away last year in that game at Orlando. Then we go at Northern Illinois. Then we play Notre Dame at Soldier Field, a neutral site game. Very excited for that one. Notre Dame should be number 1 when we play them. Then we open up Big Ten Conference play against Michigan at home, who is ranked 15 preseason. A bye week to rest up before then we get smacked in the face with Penn State, who's ranked 13th at home. That series has turned into a little bit of rivalry in this dynasty. That's a tough stretch there. Then we go at Michigan State for the second year in a row. Then into the West play, we got Minnesota, Iowa at home back-to-back. Then at Nebraska, home versus Purdue. And then we finish off at Wisconsin and at Northwestern. And yes, that is a tough schedule, especially throwing Notre Dame in there. Then we get Michigan and Michigan State and Penn State in the crossover for the Eastern games. This is going to be a tough schedule, the toughest maybe in this dynasty to this point. Now the top 25, Notre Dame, who will be playing preseason number 1, Texas A&M, Clemson won the national championship last season. Nebraska, you can see there's ranked number 7. Wisconsin's ranked number 12, Penn State 13, Michigan 15. There's our Illini sitting at 17. Then Purdue at 19, a ton of Big Ten schools here clumped up in this top 25. It'll be a very competitive conference yet again. And looking at the conference outlook here, for some reason it has Iowa as the projected top team in this division. That doesn't really make any sense, but then you got Nebraska, Wisconsin, Purdue, Minnesota's always solid. And then Illinois is picked to finish 6th in the division. Northwestern really is the only school in this division that's a easy pushover, but other than that, this division has been very tough in this dynasty, and the disrespect putting the defending conference champions at 6th in the Big Ten West. Man, oh man. Now to the East, Michigan, Penn State, Michigan State top 3. Oh, and by the way, those happen to be the 3 schools that we play in the crossover. This schedule is going to be brutal this season, but it's going to be really fun. I'm looking forward to it. Now the Heisman watch here in the preseason. Robert Lawson, who we saw in the Cotton Bowl in Season 2 for Kansas State, he is the top Heisman favorite so far going into the season. Eli Williams from TCU, another quarterback. Sam Adams II, who was ghost in the Rose Bowl last year against Washington when we played them. And then a couple quarterbacks, Hudson Card from Texas on there as well. So that'll do it for the season preview, guys. Now we are very close to week 1. We're going to open up against UCF at home. And I promise this time there will not be a corrupted file. I will make sure that we get the footage for the UCF game this year. We get them at home to open the season. Illinois is going to be a 13.5 point favorite in this one. So Illinois certainly is the better team on paper. But again, as we highlighted in this video today, there's a lot of new faces. And then as far as UCF, taking a look at this roster here, what really stands out is their cornerbacks. Their top 2 corners are Jaden Francois and Casey Thornton. Both those guys are seniors, so they'll be a tough team to throw on. Last year, Isaiah Williams really struggled in that game to throw the ball, and Illinois ran away in the second half, really thanks to Chase Hayden on the ground, and ended up winning that game 27-10, but it was very competitive up until the midway through the second half last year. So it's certainly a game that Illinois should be expected to win, but one that certainly should not be looked over. UCF is a Power 5 team. They're in the Big 12, and they are certainly capable of walking into Champaign and pulling off this victory if they play very well. And Illinois will have a very good test here. We'll get to see what this team is made of against a Power 5 opponent in week 1. One thing that I am interested to see in this game is especially Illinois' receiving core. A lot of young guys. We'll see who steps up there. And then the defense. Of course, we have the new defensive coordinator and the new 4-2-5 base defense that we're going to be debuting. So we'll see how much of a learning curve there is, if the defense is quite as good as it was last year. Last year is number 2 in the country. So we'll see how that all goes. And I'm excited, guys. I hope y'all are as well. Leave a comment, please. Let me know what your guys' predictions are for this season. I showed you guys the schedule. What do you think is a very realistic record for this Illini team? I think that, of course, getting to 12 wins like they did last year, with this schedule they got coming up, that's going to be very difficult. I think it'll be very hard for Illinois to replicate what it did last season, especially winning the Big Ten Conference with everything that went their way last year, that magical run we went on in Season 3. The defensive line is certainly a big question mark for me. This has always been a strength of this team in this dynasty, and now the defensive line may not be quite as good this season. Of course, in the off-season video, I also showed you guys the slider changes that I'll be implementing as well. So it'll be very different. There will be a little bit of a learning curve as well with these new sliders, the new 4-2-5 base defense. So if you think Illinois is going to win the Big Ten again, I love your optimism, but I would caution you as a realist myself to pump the brakes a little bit. But I am certainly up for the challenge. I hope you guys are well. I'm very excited for this season. And week 1 versus UCF will be right around the corner. Thank you guys again for watching this video. Leave a like if you enjoyed the content here. And again, can't stress enough, leave comments, guys. It helps the algorithm. I love interacting with you guys. Leave comments. Let me know what your thoughts are. And I will see you in the next video as we open up Season 4 against UCF. See you guys then.